Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin is a novel that can be considered a slave narrative. The slave narrative has a special place in American literature because it represents a continuation of an autobiographical form of writing that has always been important in American culture. The entire genre of slave narratives is very different from the Puritan autobiographies because they focus on more specific individuals and it's being shown through human experience rather than personal accounts. Slave narratives flourished in the first half of the 19th century. This novel was considered a powerful anti-slavery novel. The connection of oppression, cruelty, and the destruction of the nuclear family unit is a persistent theme in slave narratives and abolitionist literature of the 19th century, including the most powerful abolitionist tract of them all, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. The novel simply gave an example of what life was to be a slave and all the adversities the slaves face in such a cruel world. Stowe's novel gave the reader many rhetorical strategies to show and prove to the reader the evils of slavery. Harriet Beecher Stowe had an idea of a fake slave story that simply came to her as an idea, but she was able to make it into something that was of moral as well as persuasive power. It was a story that was fake but seemed realistic while it proved to the reader the seriousness and consequences of slavery. This is something the abolitionist movement called moral suasion. Without having a high-ranking political power as well as no voice in public affairs, Harriet Beecher Stowe was one of the few women who used her talent of writing to try and reach out to the worldwide audience through narrative rhetoric rather than the public speech or sermon men would give from pulpits. The influence of Stowe's books was greater than any speech or sermon of the 3 decades preceding the Civil War. Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin sold 10,000 copies within the first week. By the end of 6 months, it had sold 300,000 copies. The day before the Civil War, this novel was being read in 16 languages and had sold over 4.5 million copies. To my mind, it is the greatest novel ever written, and though it will seem strange, it reminded me more of Shakespeare than anything modern, in its many-sidedness and in that marvelous clearness of insight. This quote is simply a quote from a reader simply criticizing Stowe's work. African Americans as well as abolitionists, including Frederick Douglass, called Uncle Tom's Cabin the master book of the 19th century. Frederick Douglass would also defend Stowe when others tried to attack her about her novel due to the content in it. This novel received many great reviews as well as many harsh reviews. The novel was very influential during this time period, although it was a fictional story. This novel was a spark of much controversy, but it also increased the seriousness of this issue in the 19th century.